Well, I think time is not on our side. So what I'm going to do in this panel is to give each of the panelists time to share their thoughts, first introduce themselves and what they stand for, and also share their thoughts. But before that, I like to raise a few issues, and I think from the presentation, we've seen that one of the prominent things that people think they should have right against is internet shutdowns. My question is, shouldn't we also have responsibilities? And of course, the issue of national security. You're saying that why should national security shut down? Their responsibility is to ensure that we're protected from anything that will cause things out. So these are some of the teasing questions. Now, is it necessary to regulate the internet? And how do you ensure the rights of internet users if we are regulating this? The other thing is, of course, governments instruct ISPs to actually shut down this internet. Can we hold the ISPs and the telcos as being compromising the rights of people and being in bed with government? These are some of the things that I believe we should look at, and what CSOs can do with government to ensure that these things do not reoccur, especially in Ghana, where we haven't seen it. We don't want these things to occur. So there's a need for CSOs and government to dialogue. So I'm going to ask the panelists to just share their thoughts, and based on the presentation, and then after that, I'll come to the audience, and then they can make their remarks. We have less than 20 minutes to do this panel. So I'd like to start with Professor Quaynor.
Okay, I'm not sure how to start, but well, I'm a normal engineer, so we start from there. What I'm going to do is to put this at least in the context of IGF, and then maybe jump on one or two issues. I'm not going to say anything that you have not heard, but at least I'll try and say it in a slightly different way and give a different perspective. The start of all this Internet Governance Forum is from something we call the World Summit on Information Society. And this was a series of two major UN organized events. And the first one was in 2003, and the next was in 2005. In 2003, there was a declaration made, which was very important, and I'll see if I can find a note on it to share with you. And in this case, the note was, of course, appreciating how the technical community works, which is mostly from multi-stakeholder approach to making policy, which was more for using, you might say, consensus as the method of making decisions, working on issues as opposed to voting. So you work on the issues, to close the issues. That was the practice. And in this WSIS thing, we found out that the stakeholders were not agreeing to what the way forward was, meaning that the technical community, the business, the civil society, the government were not coming to the same point of view. So late Kofi Annan, Secretary General of the UN at the time, decided to leverage what the technical community does, which was this approach to consensus building. We call it rough consensus, or consensus building through community dialogue to discuss further what we might do. But the declaration did cite the following things, which are very important. And it said that they reaffirmed, just as was mentioned by the first presenter, they are reaffirmed a particular article the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. However, without repeating, just to make it short, however, in the actual declaration, there was something else, which was an Article 7, not 19. And the Article 7, which I'll read just to complement what you read about Article 19, went something like this. All are equal before the law and are entitled, without any discrimination, to equal protection of the law. All are entitled to equal protection against any discrimination in violation of the declaration and against any incitement to such discrimination. Now, what it's doing is that it's telling that you are free, but you're not free. See? As though saying that your freedom ends when my privacy starts. Okay? So you shouldn't abuse your freedom to the extent of infringing on other people's privacy and their freedoms as well. So this is really what has created this challenge for us, because there are two sides of this thing. Now, what needs to be known is that there are severe consequences for these shutdowns. Okay? Or a shutdown may not be total. You will observe the partial one of shutdown of applications. But you can also shut down parts of networks. And the pioneering company that we celebrate today, Network Computer Systems, was indeed shut down. At that time, it was the largest provider of internet service. Okay, but it was shut down. And today, there are media houses shut down. So it's not, it's not that the whole thing or none. It's not on or off kind of thing. It may be partial. Okay? So we should be mindful of what. How do we solve it? The thing is that under the circumstances where you have these two ends of the thing, a left parenthesis and a right parenthesis, you're going to have to use things like best practices. Okay, best practices. In this case, you have to go and find a way in which, in a global way, we work with everybody with the right and we is a better approach to this democratic approach. We tend to prefer organizing democracy, do these things by merit as opposed to democracy or, for that matter, meritocracy. So we have to pay attention to that. The impact on denial is actually not small. It's much larger than it was referred to. Because when you shut down your primary ISP, the consequence of that was today there are no Ghanaians participating in the telco service. Yet, internet was started by Ghanaians, pure Ghanaians. Okay. Even the competitors were all Ghanaians before the telcos got involved. Network computers used to carry traffic for Ghana Telecom, for also the second network operator, which was called Western. So, by deciding to shut down these things, you are hurting yourself for a long time in the future. You may not know it, but it will catch you. So, if today radio stations are shut down for whatever reason, internet companies shut down for whatever reason, there will be impact. The impact may be economic, may be social, may be political, and we're going to have to face up to them either now or in the future. The answer is go towards more collaborative, community-oriented, self-organized approach to discussing these things. And we have to actually tolerate each other, okay, and be fair. Okay, you have to be fair, and you also have to be proportionate in the decisions that we make. We don't want a decision that ends up removing one whole side. But at the same time, can't have one whole side destroy the rest. So we're going to have to talk and find a way to accommodate these things. I think this is okay for you.
Thank you, Prof. I think because of lack of time, can we limit our submissions to 3 minutes, please? And then later on we can add some more. So let's listen to Jim.
Thank you very much. So my name is Juliet Amoah. I work for an organization that uses technology to promote good governance, and we call ourselves Penplusbytes. That is beyond pens. Obviously, bytes is something that Prof and others were using a few decades ago. It's a dated term, and so one of the things we're looking at is changing that name, but it's Penplusbytes. I will look at it from the topic from the point of view of civil society actors, because that's the space that I work in. A lot of the work that we do is based on the internet. It's based on communicating with the outside world, and it's very important that we find ourselves not cut off. And so for us, this is an important discussion, and one that we've looked at in from various angles. One of the key things that we do at Penplusbytes in using tech to promote good governance is also to build the capacity of media people. And one of the things that we have done is to look at how can media people and civil society actors help in looking at or preventing governments from shutting down the internet, whether partially or holistically, or even using tactics like throttling. And I think that throttling means that they reduce the bandwidth or what's it called? What gets to the public. So they reduce the highway on which the waves travel. And so the internet happens to be slower than it should be. And so what we've done is look at how to get civil societies and media people to actually work with governments, either through looking at the laws, making sure that they know the laws, so that they are able to hold governments accountable. We've also then taught other civil society organizations how to use VPNs. Of course, these are elitists, and so not everyone can afford those private networks and circumvent the shutdowns as happens when governments strike. But that's something that we have done in the space to make sure that civil society actors are connected and can do their work as they go forward. But I'd like to take 1 minute to talk about what the moderator started with, which is the responsibilities of actors, all of us who use the internet. Should we be left free? In our thinking at Penplusbytes, no. And so we've recently started to look at a related field, which is media information literacy. And we're saying that when UNESCO puts out their 5 dimensions of media information literacy, which is accessing internet or accessing devices that produce internet, being able to analyze media content, being able to reflect on that content, act on it, and actually co-creating it because of social media, it gave room for, especially around reflection, that people are able to interact in a more responsible way with the media that they receive. And so in the last few months, that's what we've been doing, to look at how do we make sure that especially young people understand their responsibilities in creating content that is responsible, that is truthful, and that is not propagandist or misinforming or disinforming, as the case may be. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. My name is Adu-Amanfoh. I'm the Executive Director for Africa Digital Rights and Africa Cybersecurity and Digital Rights Organization. We actually focus on cybersecurity policy and strategy development, just ensuring that it has inclusiveness, that civil society participate in the development of this whole policy and strategy, because most often than not, government comes up with policies and regulations, and they don't have no input from the civil society organization. So our rights are not actually captured
it becomes actually government focused, but this time around we're trying to push so that we can have that inclusiveness, cybersecurity, civil society organization inclusiveness. And then we also focus on the digital rights. How are your rights being recognized in this whole internet ecosystem or in your digital spaces? Using your mobile phone or computer, and somebody can put in a spyware or something to affect you, how. So you need to have the right to use your digital equipment and digital ecosystem. So basically, that's what we do. Internet freedom, internet shutdown. I believe that, as the presenter said, and panelists have already spoken about it, we have the right, I believe all our rights that we enjoy in our physical environment, we still need to, as citizens, not just the civil society. We are talking about civil society. I believe we are talking about all actors, all non-governmental actors, including individuals. So our rights actually have to be, we have to actually have our rights when we use our digital space. But most often than not, it doesn't happen. That way, we've heard about the shutdown that goes on, and people being arrested for, doing what, having their freedom on the internet. So I believe when it comes to shutdown, it's a no, you don't have to do it. Most often than not, government will say that, hey, we are doing it for national security. Yes, government is responsible for the safety and security of every citizen. So in a way, they are right to ensure that they put in place measures to make sure that you and I are safe and secure as we live in this country. But also, we also have to know that as much as national security have that right, we the individuals also have our freedom, because the internet, from the advent of the internet is supposed to be free. So if you go to the ITU, there is we don't give licenses to internet service providers, the mobile operators, no, the regulators, telecom regulators don't issue licenses to internet service providers. They only give authorization just to recognize that, hey, I'm legally registered company in Ghana, and I can operate. This is what I do. So it's supposed to be free. But looking at all this and all this attacks and all that, it looks like there's a discussion still going on at IT that should the internet actually be regulated, and you have those that goes for the yes and those that goes for the no. So it looks like that if it has to be regulated, who has to regulate it? Does it have to be government, or it has to be individual? Now, thinking about all this, I think the best approach to address all these issues is to have a multi-stakeholder approach, which Prof rightly mentioned. Multi-stakeholder approach happening, it takes place in not just managing the internet, in all different policies that government implement. If you use a multi-stakeholder approach, you are very well able to implement and enforce, whatever policies you put in place. Because if I have the right to make my input into it, and I appreciate the final product that comes, or final policy that comes out, then we'll all be in a norm, right? If I work in an organization and there is an IT policy, and I don't introduce the policy to you, how do you even know how to use the don'ts and don'ts, how to use the digital equipment that I've given you, how to use the internet within your organization? So it's important to have policies and rules to guide. But this policy doesn't have to be top, only the top just pushing on the downtrodden low. It has to be an inclusive process. And that is one of the areas that ACDRO pushes for it. That, look, let us have all stakeholders participate in this the development of the strategy, so that we all appreciate and we all know. When we come to internet shutdown, I think one of the best approaches that we can engage government to do this is not, if you ask me, it is not always using force and just coming out and going on demonstrations. And I don't think we have to wait until it happens before we try to do some damage control. I think right from the onset we need to engage government. They can be
a cordial relationship. Let's engage government. I was part of the team actually led the development of best practices for network shutdowns and then guidelines for network shutdowns for governments. This was led by the Freedom Online Coalition. Freedom Online Coalition is a coalition of governments that actually appreciate the fact that the rights of the citizens has to be, enforced on our internet ecosystem. So they come out together and say, look, we need to make sure whatever policies that we do, we have the rights of we have to make sure that the rights of the civil society or the citizenry are not infringed. So I was part to do that. These are documents that as civil society organization, we can even add on to it, and then try and promote it to government. Let's engage them. Look, these are best practices. When you have any issue, these are the way to go. You don't just have to come. If a national security issue, fine. And let's follow the best practices. Let's do it right. Thank you. I see my moderator. So I think I'll put it here. We're
running out of time. Still, I need to control the time.
I think my panelists have said everything, but what I want to add is that yes, government will continue to cite national security, but I think the damage internet shutdowns cause on individuals, it's massive, and they should go through the due process when they want to shut down the internet. It shouldn't just sudden, even though I don't think there's any justification for a government to shut down the internet. For instance, civil society has indicated we have a key role to play, and the media. The media has a very, very important role to play as well. I want to cite an incident that happened in Zimbabwe earlier this year. So there was protests as usual, the government shut down the internet. And civil society groups said, no, we are taking this case to court. And it went to court, there was a hearing, and then the judge ruled the shutdown was illegal and ordered the minister who ordered ISPs to shut down the platforms to restore them with immediate effect. This was a landmark decision because it doesn't easily happen. But I think we should also let governments know that, yes, there are organizations advocating for citizens' rights, but they have the major responsibility to ensure that each and every citizen in the country and even outside the country is protected. So I think I've said.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think our panelists have given us their thoughts on what they think is the right thing to do. And Prof actually took us back to the declarations and showed us that, of course, much as we have the freedom, we don't have it because it's constrained by certain things. And he advocates that we should focus more on self-regulation and collaborative discussions to agree on the way forward. Juliet also has came in and said, well, yes, it's important that we don't have shutdowns, but of course, the responsibility aspect of the shutdown is very, very important. We need to be responsible on the internet. And so he talks about a program that they have initiated so that people can be aware and they would use their rights responsibly on the internet. And Ken also talks about the policy aspect. I mean, before policies come out, they should have our rights incorporated. In many cases, it's not been so. And so the advocacy to have these things done. And of course, he also approves of a multi-stakeholder approach in dealing with this, inclusiveness. And of course, one of the things that he said is that there is this kind of a shutdown best practice, which everybody can lay hands on, perhaps online, that governments could use when it becomes crucial for them to do shutdowns. So Felicia has also reiterated and said that, yes, you know, we don't have to go there, but of course, stakeholders have an important role in educating and doing things, and especially the media for that matter. And he cited that what do you call it, that ruling that reversed the shutdown. Now, I want to bring the conversation to you, our audience. What are your thoughts? Do you agree with the submissions that our panelists have made? And so if you want to make a submission, just raise your hand. Maybe we'll take a maximum of 5 submissions, if they are, and then we'll come to the panelists to conclude. Unfortunately, we are almost out of time, and we don't have too much. So if you want to make a contribution or ask a question, please raise your hand, and the mic will be brought to you. Yes, let's see by show of hands how many people want to make interventions. Okay, so we have Dr. Dakwa. Please make your submission, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the eminent presenters, and I acknowledge the background information given by Prof. And looking at the fact that since 2003 we are still in this debate shows that it's a huge subject matter. The subject matter shared principles. How do we agree on the shared principles? How do we agree on the norms? How do we agree on the basis on which both parties, all the parties, in fact, the private sector, the government, and the civil, I think we are all aware of that. Even the absence of guidelines on social media bring a bit of a mess. There is a big gap, and the forum should find a way of submitting a way forward so that next year, by the time we meet here, at least we'll have our blueprint of Ghana's shared idea towards the issue. The government is the only platform on which the ITU without any accreditation from government or anybody. You can just register and go. It means that it is a matter which is towards the community approach. And I think we must have that in mind. Also balance the right and accessibility issues as I discussed. Thank you very much.
I would just like to find out from Prof. I've listened to the discussions, and then, you know, when we talk about internet shutdown, I mean, there are so many elements that goes into that. The first one is maybe for everyone to know, those that don't know, the cost of doing business online. Let's say government business, I want to apply for a passport also online. And if everything is automated, then that means I cannot go online and then do that transaction.
Exactly, that's
So I want to know.
Ben, be sincere to yourself. Now get the office, they who greet first.
No, in Iran.
Many will do not more respond. If you are calling someone, who is the person to it is not the one to say, go online.
Online anywhere, because if you don't say hello, if you don't say hello, the person will not know. If I know, can you say hello?
That means you respond before I enter.
Which office difference? It's not just the one.
Please go online.
No, but no. If you're
Thank you. Before we ask the panelists to answer the questions and conclude, I'd like us to also hear from the remote participants. So Stephen will read their questions, and then I will ask the panel to respond. Then the question is,
what example of due process of shutting down the internet can you relate when there is a national security issue involved?
Can you read it again?
Okay. What example of due process of shutting down the internet can you relate when there is a national security issue involved? And the second one is, where or when do we draw the thin line between where one's rights end and where or when government rights begin?
Dear Prof, panelists to answer the questions that is within their area and then give us their concluding remarks. Start from Felicia.
Due process. I think all the internet shutdowns that have happened have been instant. If an internet shutdown is supposed to happen, it should go through the courts. The courts should analyze and prove that the national security issue is way important than the human rights of the citizens. I don't remember clearly, there's a provision for that, but that is what it's supposed to. The government is supposed to prove that the national security issue it is the only way out, or the internet shutdown is the only way out to resolve that particular national security. And I honestly don't know what that can be. Because if there is, I don't get it. There's chaos. And like I said, you shut down the internet. How do you want us to communicate? How do I tell my mother in the village that this is happening outside, don't step out? How do and to some government actually shut down mobile telephone services as well. So it's just like you are off. You can't do anything about it. A thin line between government responsibility and the rights of citizens. Like I said, governments are the ones who are responsible to ensure that each and every one, it shouldn't just be one citizen. Each and every one, whether it's 1, 2, 3, is able to exercise their fundamental rights because they came up with constitutions that guarantee our rights. And so they should ensure that they work towards realizing these provisions that have been enshrined in our constitutions. And so yes, the national security issue will always come up, but I think we should open the discussion and analyze how internet shutdowns resolve national security issues. If any government has been able to prove that when we shut down the internet, this national security issue was prevented, then we can start the conversation around it.
So Felicia is saying we should open up discussions to agree on some of these things. Yes, Ken. Yes, thank you. What's the due process? I just talked about the network shutdown best practices and guidelines which I led in developing for the Freedom Online Coalition. And as I said, this Freedom Online consists of government, so it is actually governments that have accepted this. But what is happening is that they are not even enforcing it, they are not implementing it, even though they've signed to it, they are not. So this I can, there's not in my time that I can go through, but there are due processes that you have to follow. If you want to shut down something and you don't even give a person prior notice before shutting, I think this is a due process that one could follow. We must be aware that no government or even the president, right, or the telecom regulator can contact any mobile network operator or so to request for information about a citizen or subscriber, which is captured in the mobile network operators' license conditions. So you can't even demand. So as Felicia said,
before you can interrupt the service, I believe you need a court, order to do that. Before you can even go and say, I'm going to shut down, because we are going to infringe. Don't forget that the mobile network operators have a service level agreement with every subscriber. So you subscribe and you pay this bundle, and I promise I'm going to give you 99% and this. So I can't just interrupt it. So government can do, but these mobile operators can also be sued by the citizens or by the subscribers. So there are best practices that, or due processes that are there that we need to follow. And as I'm saying, if the citizens, the government can see the CSOs and the citizenry as partners in framing their policies and order, and work together to implement these policies and strategies, I'm sure we will be able to overcome this menace. Thank you.
Just to pick up from there, I think that in some instances, governments have actually coerced internet service providers to actually throttle or shut down the internet. And so I think that it behoves on them, the service providers, to then circumvent those, because as Ken was saying, they can't be sued. And that circumvention would be to actually put out an SMS or actually find ways to inform their users of what the government has asked them clandestinely to do. And so by so doing, they have a chance to mobilize citizens to pressure governments to stop those shutdowns. And I think that the whole internet governance issue is a very complex issue. And unfortunately, we only have an hour to discuss it or less. And so there isn't a lot that we can say about the various aspects of it given the time. But those would be my final thoughts. It behoves on telcos, civil society actors, and all of us to actually find ways in the instances that shutdowns have happened to actually pressure governments using our legal options. And we have to know those legal options and then act on them. Thank you.
Thank you. I think maybe we are wasting too much time trying to solve a problem which is not. No environment should ever shut down anything. They have been shut down before. And you asked of costs. That time we were shut down, the company in 2003 November was doing $2.3 million a year. Okay, so if you had left such a company and things had been done correctly, you can imagine how much revenue would have been generated and taxes paid to government between that time and now. Okay, so I think we have been, beating a dead horse. Okay. Now we mentioned guidelines. Ask yourself, how come the so-called developed countries are not shutting down anything? Okay. So don't waste time coming out with guidelines and all those things. From my point, it's something we're supposed to avoid and find ways through our governance processes to make sure they do not happen. So if it happens, it means our own governance has failed, unfortunately. So we need to somehow change something. Of course, the argument is that if we come together and we talk more, we might find ways to avoid those things, which I support. On the question of due process, a lot depends, right? Because for instance, if you go to an area of interception, there may be laws which prescribe what the due process is. But perhaps in this area, such laws may not exist. And so what due process are you following other than the common law due process, which says you should give the person an opportunity to explain or defend himself and so on and so forth. But if it was like interception and law exists, then there are specific requirements that say that you must go to a particular judge or so and get a certain kind of order so that you can do it in a certain kind of way to manage damage, collateral, and so on and so forth. So there may be things we have to think about and do. Will be how I react to that. it says rights, and I think this was answered quite well, because the one who is supposed to guarantee our rights is the state, and sometimes, not necessarily in Ghana, but sometimes in general, the state is an actor. So if the person who is supposed to guarantee your rights is an actor in perpetrating this thing, then how do you work it? Okay, so I think it's a governance issue, and the governance that we have to solve requires more participation of people, okay, beyond government policy authority, more participation among stakeholders, so that we can make the area not so sharp, but a little bit more fuzzy, so that we can all coexist and be successful in developing the information society. That's how we are.
Well, so thank you very much, Prof, and all the other panelists. I think the sense that we get here is that our digital communities, we all have roles and responsibilities. The media, the technical community, and everybody within the digital community. So whatever the challenges are, what I hear all of us say is that we can actually discuss and arrive at these things. And this forum is one of the forums that we can use. And on that note, I'd like to thank all the panelists. Thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause.